Huh? Okay, so we're good. All right. Well, last week we left off on page 363, reading the object of devotion for observing the mind. And we're going to continue now, but I'm going to go back like I do for continuity's sake. If you remember last week, we got to a point where there was this long question, right? Mm-hmm. And then he basically answered it by saying that this is really all about the mutual possession of the 10 worlds, right? That's what's being explained in those things that they were questioning. Doesn't it already say this? Doesn't it already say that? He's going, yes, but it's not fully elucidated. It doesn't really exist yet as an actualized concept, okay? But he's saying all the Buddhas know about this, regardless, okay? Mm-hmm. And so he's saying, let me just go down. I'll start at the very bottom of page 262. We just left off at the top column, page 263. So I'm just going to go here where it says, concerning the last paragraph on page 262, concerning the passage in the Lotus Sutra that you quoted here in the previous part of this paragraph, or this answer. He says, he, the Buddha, has rooted out evil from among all phenomena. Here the Buddha is referring to a teaching from one of the earlier sutras. But when you take a closer look at the sutra, it is clear that the mutual possession of the 10 worlds is being explained. Now, what is the significance of the mutual possession of the 10 worlds? Why is the mutual possession of the 10 worlds an important concept? And when did it begin? Mutual possession of the 10 worlds is Ichinen and Sanzen, yes. But what is the significance of mutual possession of the 10 worlds? Say it out loud.
Buddhahood.
That's right, Buddhahood. That Buddhahood is contained in the 9 worlds, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so he's saying it is clear that the mutual possession of the 10 worlds is being explained. Who explained the mutual possession of the 10 worlds? Tiantai! There we go. Now we're okay. So this is all, again, you can see there's a process of contribution that's like a building. It's like a rung of a ladder, climbing up through the centuries, getting closer and closer to Mappo. And as it gets closer and closer to Mappo, more and more is revealed that will be necessary to be known for the purpose of the advent of the original teacher in Mappo. So he's not starting from scratch. Right? So he's not just looked upon as somebody that's making stuff up that's not based on anything that's preceded it. Do you understand? This is all very important for you to understand because that's the way that I've shown and viewed his life and the history of Buddhism. All right? So be aware of that. We can see that that continues on today. Right? It really, actually, if you think, I won't qualify anything, but it's the truth. Okay? So going on from page 362 at the very bottom, he says, it is clear that the mutual possession of the 10 worlds is being explained. For in the same sutra this passage is found, the Buddhas wish to open the door of the Buddha wisdom to all living beings. Tentai comments on this passage as follows. If people do not possess innate Buddha wisdom, how could the Buddha say he wanted to open it? One must understand that Buddha wisdom is inherent in all human beings. So Buddhahood is an inherent potentiality for everyone. The great, no matter who they are, no matter how they behave. The great teacher Chang'an, disciple of Tentai, concludes, how could people open the door to and realize their Buddha wisdom if it did not exist within them? How could a person show the poor woman her treasure repository if the treasure repository did not exist? It is, however, extremely difficult to convince you that Shakyamuni Buddha, the Lord of Teachings, exists within us just as the other 9 worlds do. And he's Shakyamuni is being referenced as the world of Buddhahood, okay, the 10th world. Therefore, he gives us this admonishment beforehand. Among the sutras I have preached, now preach, and will preach, this Lotus Sutra is the most difficult to believe and the most difficult to understand. The 6 difficult and 9 easy acts he expounds in the next chapter explains how difficult it is. Hence, the great teacher Tentai states, because the theoretical and the essential teachings of the Lotus Sutra contradict all the earlier sutras, they are extremely difficult to believe and difficult to understand, no less difficult than facing an enemy who is armed with a spear. The great teacher Chang'an comments, the Buddha intended these as his ultimate teachings. How could they ever be easy to understand? The great teacher Dengyo remarks, the Lotus Sutra is the most difficult to believe and to understand because in it the Buddha directly revealed what he had attained. In the more than 1800 years after the Buddha's passing, only 3 persons throughout the 3 countries perceived this correct doctrine. They are Shakyamuni Buddha in India, the great teacher Dengyo, or the great teacher Tiantai of China, and the great teacher Dengyo of Japan. These 3 men are all Buddhist sages. All right, continuing from where we left off last week. 363, second column. What about Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu? Answer. These sages knew but did not expound it. They expounded part of the theoretical teaching, but did not expound either the essential teaching or the truth that the Buddha had observed in his mind. And he's talking about the essential teaching of the Lotus Sutra, right? Perhaps the people in their age were capable of believing it, but the time was not ripe to expound it, as the selection of time another Gosha will explain. Or perhaps neither the people's capacity nor the time was appropriate. After the advent of Tiantai and Dengyo, many Buddhists learned of the doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life through the wisdom of these 2 sages. They included Chiashang of the 3 Treatises school, more than 100 priests of the 3 schools of the south and 7 schools of the north in China, Fatsang, Qing Liang of the Flower Garland school, the Tripitaka master Sun Tan, and the great teacher Tzu-in of the Dharma Characteristics School, the Tripitaka master Shanmu Wei, Qing Kang Chi, and Pukung of the True Words School, and Tao Xun of the Precept School. At first, they all opposed Tiantai, but later they totally accepted his teachings. Now, to dispel the grave doubts you have about Buddhahood within the human world, as far as this mutual possession of the 10 worlds is concerned. He says, I refer you to the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, which is part of the threefold Lotus Sutras, we all know, right? Which states, good men, such persons are like a prince newly born to the king of a country and his queen. When he is 1 day, 2 days, or 7 days old, 1 month, 2 months, or 7 months old, 1 year, 2 years, or 7 years old, though he is not yet able to manage the affairs of state, already he is respected and looked up to by the ministers and the people. He is a companion to the sons of other great kings, and the king and queen love and dote on him and are forever talking with him. Why? Because he is still just a child. Good men, the person who upholds this sutra is like this. The Buddhas, who are the king, and the sutra, which is the queen, join together in harmony to give birth to this bodhisattva son. If the bodhisattva is able to hear this sutra, whether it is 1 line or 1 verse, 1 repetition, 2 repetitions, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, or immeasurable countless repetitions equal to the sands of 1,010,000 Ganges rivers, though he cannot fully grasp the extent of its truth, already he is revered and looked up to by all the 4 kinds of Buddhists and the 8 kinds of non-human beings, and he has the great bodhisattvas for his companions. He is constantly guarded and kept in mind by the Buddhists who pity and love him, favor and shelter him, because he is new in these studies. Okay, so what did he just say there? What did he just explain? It's not how much you know, it's not the maturity or the depth of your perception, it's your faith in the teaching. Do you understand? In other words, a child has to take everything on faith as they're learning, right? They're learning from someone that has a greater capacity than themselves, someone older generally, someone that's a teacher. But that doesn't change the merit that they possess by having started on the path of being educated. Do you understand? So that's what he's saying. He's saying the people that are just starting and those that have followed are equal, okay? Because they're engaging in the sutra of great equality. Good men, the person who upholds this sutra is like this. The Buddha, who are the king, and the sutra, which is the queen, join together in harmony to give birth to this bodhisattva son. If the bodhisattva is able to hear this sutra, whether it is one line or one verse, one repetition, two repetitions, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, or immeasurable countless repetitions, equal to the sands of 1,000,000, 10,000 Ganges rivers, though he cannot fully grasp the extent of its truth, already he is revered and looked up to by all 4 kinds of Buddhists and the 8 kinds of non-human beings, and he has the great bodhisattvas for his companions. He is constantly guarded and kept in mind by the Buddhas, who pity and love him, favor and shelter him, because he is new in these studies. The Universal Worthy Sutra says, this great vehicle sutra, which again, we started with a quote from the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, and then the Universal, so threefold Lotus Sutra, front and end, are being quoted here. The Universal Worthy Sutra says, the Great Vehicle Sutra is the treasure storehouse of the Buddhas, the eye of the Buddhas of the 10 directions and the 3 existences, the seed from which spring the thus come ones of the 3 existences. You should practice the great vehicle and never let the seed of Buddhahood die out. Do you understand what it means by never let the seed of Buddhahood die out? Constantly being propagated, right? It also declares this correct and equal sutra is the eye of the Buddhas, plural. It is through this sutra that the Buddhas are able to acquire the 5 types of vision. A Buddha's 3 types of bodies are born from this correct and equal sutra, which is the great seal of the law that assures entry into the sea of nirvana. It is from this sea that a Buddha's 3 types of pure bodies are born. These 3 types of bodies are fields of good fortune for human and heavenly beings. Now we should go on to survey the entire range of the Thus Come One Shakyamuni's teachings. The exoteric, did everybody understand that, by the way? Did you? Or not? Let me back up a little bit. Let's go back to the Universal Worthy Sutra, because he's reiterating the same point, actually. Going further to the point that I had just read, he goes, the Universal Worthy says, this great vehicle sutra is the treasure storehouse of the Buddhas. Okay? This great vehicle sutra is the Lotus Sutra. All right? The great vehicle is actually what? Hasn't been revealed yet, because it's not the latter day of the law. But what is the great vehicle? Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Okay? This great vehicle, which is the Lotus Sutra in the latter day. This great vehicle sutra is the treasure storehouse of the Buddhas. Why? Because it's the teaching by which all of them became Buddhas without exception. The eye of the Buddhas of the 10 directions and the 3 existences. Everybody right? That means everywhere for all time. Past, present, and future, right? The seed, comma, and that this is all. The seed from which the thus come ones of the 3 existences. Do you understand? That's what they spring from, right? That's what they give, what gives rise to them. The Lotus Sutra. Do you understand what I'm saying? These are not common mortals, even though they're born as common mortals. Okay? They're ultimately destined, based on the causes that they've made, to become Buddhas. Not because of God or something saved them, but because of the merit of their own faith and practice, which they reveal in each lifetime. Are you all with me? Okay. So, he said, you should, the Universal Worthy continues, you should practice the great vehicle and never let the seed of Buddhahood die out. So what is that saying to us in the latter day of the law? You should chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, propagate it, and never let it die for the 10,000 years of Mappo and beyond. That's your mission as a bodhisattva of the earth. That's the vow that you took before you entered this Sahe world. Okay? All right. It also declares the correct and equal sutra is the eye of the Buddhas. It is through this sutra that the Buddhas are able to acquire the 5 types of vision, to attain Buddhahood, okay? To become Buddhas. A Buddha's 3 types of bodies are born from this correct and equal sutra. Which is the great, and which are the 3 bodies? The Dharma body, right?
Manifest body,
right?
reward body,
and the reward body. Buddhist, 3 types of bodies are born from this correct and equal sutra, which is the great seal of the law that assures entry into the sea of nirvana. It is from this sea that a Buddha's 3 types of pure bodies are born. These 3 types of bodies are fields of good fortune for human and heavenly beings. Now, we should go on to survey, when we go on to survey the entire range of the Thus Come One Shakyamuni's teachings, the exoteric and esoteric, which is what? What's the exoteric? As well as esoteric. There are schools that are sustaining a belief that there are secret teachings, specifically true word, right? Mm-hmm. The mudras. Okay, so that's all, anything that's secret, all right, is exoteric. Anything that is visible that you can perceive and read, that's esoteric. No, pardon me, just the opposite. Esoteric is what you can't, yeah, right. Exoteric, it's out that you can read it, okay? Mm-hmm. So he's saying, but both types. He's qualifying there is no teaching. This includes true words, secret shit, and it includes all of the sutras that we all know, right? Mm-hmm. All right, okay. The exoteric and esoteric, as well as Hinayana and Mahayana, and specifically the sutras on which each school, such as the Flower Garland and True, depends for its doctrine. So again, he qualifies that the schools and the sutras that those schools are named after are not synonymous. The schools are understandings of what those sutras are saying. And the Daishonin is saying that there's a greater understanding that is on the surface visible within all sutras, right? Okay, so he's saying, for example, the Flower Garland Sutra describes Vairocana Buddha seated on the lotus pedestal extending in the 10 directions. The Great Collection Sutra, a cloud of Buddhas who had gathered together. The Wisdom Sutra, the emergence of 1,000 Buddhas teaching the non-duality of pure and impure. And the Mahayana and Diamond Crown Sutras, and the more than 1,200 honored ones. These sutras all explain the past practices of Shakyamuni Buddha and the Buddhahood he consequently attained in this life, but they do not reveal the original cause for his enlightenment in the remote past. Okay? Because what has Shakyamuni actually been doing as he's been preaching those sutras? Who has he been preaching them to? Has he been preaching them to bodhisattvas of the essential teaching? No. He's been preaching them to his disciples that he gathered as the 16th son of great universal wisdom excellence, right? Mm-hmm. He's the people that he can help through the former and the middle day of the law. Okay, and that's why he's going through the expedient means of the Flower Garland True Word. He's trying to get up to the lotus, which he'll do at the end of his life, right? These sutras all explain the past practices of Shakyamuni Buddha and the Buddhahood he consequently attained in this life, but they do not reveal the original cause for his enlightenment in the remote past, because that original cause for enlightenment is what led him to be the teacher that is expressed in all that other stuff. Do you understand? Teaching his disciples as the 16th son of great universe, not the bodhisattvas of the earth. Those aren't his disciples. Understand that? Yes. They're not his disciples. No. Nope. Okay. He's going to explain that. He's going to explain that very clearly right now. All right. It's us. Pardon?
The bodhisattvas, it's us.
Yes, the bodhisattvas of the earth are us. But we're disciples of the original teacher. Shakyamuni is not the original teacher. No. He's the 16th son of great person. I mean, well, let's start there. It is true that the immediate attainment of Buddhahood is revealed in the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings. It is true that the immediate attainment of Buddhahood is revealed in the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings, but they do not mention Shakyamuni Buddha teaching his disciples since major world system dust particle kalpas ago, or numberless major world system dust particle kalpas ago, as it does in the Lotus Sutra. Therefore, no revelation is made of when the Buddha started teaching or when he finished. The Flower Garland Sutra seems to belong to the higher two, and the Mahayana Sutra to all of the 4 teachings, the Tripitaka connecting specific and perfect teachings. But in truth, these sutras actually fall into the category of the Tripitaka and connecting teachings, the lower 2 of the 4, because they do not expound the three inherent potentials of the Buddha nature. And I wanted to read that to you, because the three inherent potentials of the Buddha nature. I just wanted to share what it says about that. Number 46. The three inherent potentials of the Buddha nature are innate Buddhahood, okay, that you are a Buddha regardless, right? Even if you're just a Buddha in theory. The wisdom to perceive it is the second one, and the Buddha that perceives their Buddhahood, and then the deeds that cause the nature to develop. To perceive it and to manifest it are two different things. Because the perception requires action, but the expression requires even more so. Because it's not just something of attaining Buddhahood for one's own salvation of the mind, which means there's persecution and perseverance in the life of every Buddha. It's not just about attaining a state of mind or a state of wisdom or a state of understanding. It's through that process, having that process happen, but that then sends you embarking on a whole different mission of functionality and purpose in your life. You live as the Buddha, right? There's no Buddha that actually has attained Buddhahood that doesn't live the rest of their life as the Buddha. They don't take vacations. They don't become other people. They don't find other things, other interests, other ways to occupy their time. They devote themselves to the propagation of law. They devote themselves ultimately to making all people equal to themselves. All Buddhas do exactly that thing. All right, so he says, where am I? Point me.
I think this is true that
hang on, shoot. Okay.
It is true.
Okay,
yeah.
It is true, right? Okay, pardon me. In the middle of second column, page 364. It is true that the immediate attainment of Buddhahood is revealed in the pre-Lotus Sutras, but they do not mention Shakyamuni Buddha teaching his disciples since major world system dust particle kalpas ago, or numberless major world system dust particle kalpas ago. Therefore, no revelation is made of when the Buddha started teaching or when he finished. The Flower Garland Sutra seems to belong to the higher two and the Mahavajrana Sutra to all four teachings, the Tripitaka connecting specific and perfect teaching, but these sutras actually fall into the category of the Tripitaka and connecting teaching, the lower two of the four, because they do not expound the three inherent potentials of the Buddha nature, and that's when I flipped over here.
Yeah.
How can we define these sutras as the seeds of enlightenment? We cannot. Okay? The translators of the newer versions of the sutras learned about Tentai's doctrine, because they don't contain the doctrine of 3,000 realms, they don't contain the ability for you to attain Buddhahood in your present form. The translators of the newer versions of the sutras learned about Tentai's doctrines, because the sutras are being brought up all the time in Sanskrit from India and being translated into Chinese, right? He says that the translators of the newer versions of sutras learned about Tentai's doctrines of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life when they came to China. When they translated Sanskrit sutras into Chinese, some put Tentai's principle into their translations, and others claimed that the originals they had brought from India already contained it. Some of the scholars of the Tentai school were simply pleased that other schools were expounding the same doctrine as theirs, while others praised the Buddhism of India and slighted that of China, or discarded their original doctrines and adopted new ones. These scholars yielded to their devilish nature and to foolishness. Ultimately, however, without the seed of Buddhahood, which is the mutual possession of the 10 worlds, which is that doctrine of the mutual possession of the 10 worlds, that is, the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, sentient beings cannot become Buddhas, and any statue or painting would be an object of devotion in name only. Everybody understands, right? Where we've gone so far, right? Question. You have not fully answered my question about the 10 worlds. Buddhahood, in particular, being inherent in the human world. Answer. The Immeasurable Meaning Sutra states, again, first of the threefold Lotus Sutra, states that although they have not yet been able to practice the 6 paramitas, the 6 paramitas will of themselves appear before them. The Lotus Sutra says, All wish to hear the teaching of perfect endowment. The Nirvana Sutra states, Sad indicates perfect endowment. Bodhisattva Nagarjuna comments, Sad signifies 6. The profound meaning of the 4 Mahayana treatises states, Sad connotes 6. In India, the number 6 implies perfect endowment. In his commentary, Qishang writes, Sad is translated as perfect endowment. Do you understand this? They're saying over and over and over, perfect, perfect, ultimate, ultimate, right? That's the point here. The Sad is translated as perfect endowment. The great teacher Tintai remarks, Sad is a Sanskrit word which is translated as myo, or wonderful. If I add my own interpretation, it will be as if I had profaned these passages, but in essence they mean that Shakyamuni's practices and the virtues he constantly attained are all contained within the 5 characters of Myoho Renge-kyo. If we believe in these 5 characters, we will naturally be granted the same benefits as he was. But do note how he puts in here, I'm not saying that I know what he's really saying, but he did pull back a little bit there. He says, if I add my own interpretation, it will be as if I had profaned these passages. So I'm not going to step on the Sad 6. He's always talking about the 5 or 7 characters of Myoho Renge-kyo. But when we chant Nam Myoho Renge-kyo, how many sounds are we? 6. Nam Myoho Renge-kyo. 6. Perfect endowment is Nam Myoho Renge-kyo, is what he's saying in code. The actual perfect endowment is Nam Myoho Renge-kyo. With full understanding of Shakyamuni, that's how you gain the same merit as Shakyamuni. All right? With full understanding of Shakyamuni's teachings, the 4 great voice hearers said, this cluster of unsurpassed jewels has come to us unsought. Because you sure never have the wisdom to perceive any of that when you start chanting, right? They represent the world of the voice hearer that is within ourselves. The Buddha stated at the start, I took a vow, hoping to make all persons equal to me without any distinction between us. And what I longed for long ago hoped for has now been fulfilled. I have converted all living beings and caused them to enter the Buddha way. Shakyamuni Buddha, who has attained perfect enlightenment, is our own flesh and blood. His practices and the resulting virtues are our bones and marrow. The Treasure Tower chapter of the Lotus Sutra says, he who is capable of guarding the law of this sutra will thereby have offered alms to me and to many treasures. One who guards this sutra will also have offered alms to the emanation Buddhas who have come here adorning and making brilliant all the various worlds. Pardon me. Shakyamuni, many treasures, and the Buddhas of the 10 directions represent the world of Buddhahood within ourselves. This is Nichiren teaching you the meaning of the Lotus Sutra. Okay? This isn't me saying this, but I would think he knows what he's talking about. Okay? So if he's saying this is all rather metaphorical, and he's qualifying for that for the people in the 13th century, after all those centuries of looking at this as like spooky supernatural shit, he's trying to bring it into the realm of reality now. This is all about how you become the Buddha, not how you read about Buddhas that you glorify and look at out, and you, oh, please, Buddhas. No, this is how you qualify what you have always been. By searching them, he says, one who got, pardon me, he is capable, okay, where am I? Question, you have not yet, okay, yeah, I'm still over on the left-hand side, pardon me.
So one who guards this sutra will have...
Where?
Yeah,
No, by searching them out with us.
Okay, pardon me, yes. One who guards this sutra will have also one who guards this sutra will also have offered alms to the emanation Buddhas who have come here adorning and making brilliant all the various worlds. Shakyamuni, many treasures, and the Buddhas of the 10 directions represent the world of Buddhahood within ourselves. Pardon me. And here's an asterisk right here where I wanted to start. By searching them out within us, we can receive the benefits of all these Buddhas. Now, how do you search them out within us?
By chanting.
With that seeking spirit of wanting to attain Buddhahood and to share the law with others. This is what is meant by the following passage. If one listens to them, the preachers of the law, which you become, when you do what this is saying, right?
For
You are all
knowledge.
teachers of the law, right? So
Yeah.
he's talking about you, right? Okay, by searching them out within us, we can receive the same benefits as these Buddhists. This is what is meant by the following passage. If one listens to them, the preachers of the law, for even one moment, one will immediately attain supreme perfect enlightenment. The Lifespan chapter reads, it has been immeasurable, boundless, hundreds, thousands, because the seed's been planted. The seed's been planted at that point. The Lifespan chapter, and it doesn't matter if you're a child, a baby of 1 day, 2 days, it doesn't matter. You're still the prince. Okay? The Lifespan chapter reads, it has been immeasurable, boundless, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, millions of nayutas of kalpas since I, in fact, attained Buddhahood. The Shakyamuni, now notice how he says this, the Shakyamuni Buddha within us. He's saying the Shakyamuni, like there are different kinds of Shakyamuni. So watch how he writes this. The Shakyamuni Buddha within our lives, that Shakyamuni Buddha that I'm talking about right now, okay, is the eternal Buddha since time without beginning, who obtained the three bodies more than numberless major world system dust particle kalpas ago. And who does he call? What does he call that Buddha in the 16th chapter of the Lotus Sutra when he does the OTT? The Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, thus come one. That's the differentiator. He's talking about the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, thus come one now. He's not talking about the Shakyamuni Buddha. But he's talking to people so long ago, he's got to be careful how he expresses himself, even though this is being written to his closest disciples. Okay? So, the Shakyamuni Buddha within our lives is the eternal Buddha since time without beginning, who obtained the three bodies more than numberless major world system dust particle kalpas ago, which is the original point that Shakyamuni got his, right? So it's the Buddha that precedes Shakyamuni. The Lifespan chapter states, originally I practiced the Bodhisattva way, and the lifespan that I acquired then is yet to come to an end, but will last twice the number of years that have already passed. He was speaking of the world of the Bodhisattva within ourselves. It's also always there. The Bodhisattvas, as numerous as the dust particles of 1,000 worlds who emerge from beneath the earth, are the followers of the Shakyamuni Buddha present in our lives. Right? Now you get the code? Okay. Because you can imagine, he's got to be careful how he says this. They followed the Buddha just as Tai Kung, Wang and Tan, the Duke of Chao, served as ministers to King Wu of the Chao dynasty and later assisted his son and successor, the infant King Ch'en, or just as the chief minister Takanauchi supported Empress Jingu and later her grandson, Crown Prince Nintoku, as a highly valued minister. The Bodhisattvas, superior practices, boundless practices, pure practices, and firmly established practices, okay, the four great Bodhisattvas of the Bodhisattvas of the earth, represent the world of Bodhisattva within ourselves. We're all four of them, okay? Depends on what we're doing and how we're expressing our faith. The great teacher Miolo says, you should understand that one's life and its environment at a single moment encompass the 3,000 realms. Therefore, when one attains the Buddha way, one puts oneself in accord with this fundamental principle, and one's body and mind at a single moment pervade the entire realm of phenomena. First, you can't get more connected than that. First, at his place of enlightenment, Shakyamuni Buddha preached the Flower Garland Sutra, in which he revealed the Lotus Treasury world. In the following 50 years until he entered Nirvana in the Grove of Saltry, Shakyamuni preached about the lands of the various Buddhas, such as the Lotus Treasury world and the world of secret solemnity in the Secret Solemnity Sutra. Revealed the three kinds of lands when he 3 times purified countless lands in the theoretical teaching of the Lotus Sutra, and revealed the 4 kinds of lands according to 4 different views in the Nirvana Sutra. These lands, the land of transition, the land of actual reward, the land of tranquil light, the land of peace and sustenance, the pure emerald world, the land of secret solemnity, and the lands of all the other Buddhas are transient lands that change in the course of the kalpas of formation, continuation, decline, and disintegration. Do you understand what he's saying there? Let me continue. The Buddhas of these lands had been magically conjured by Shakyamuni Buddha when the Lord of Teachings entered nirvana. All these Buddhas likewise entered extinction. In the same way, their lands also vanished. They were expedient means. Okay? The Sahe world of Shakyamuni Buddha, revealed in the Lifespan chapter, is the eternal pure land. So, all those Buddha lands, all those places, okay? All those great stories that inspired the people before the pure teaching, they didn't have the fortune to be us. We're bodhisattvas of the earth. They're just disciples of Shakyamuni. Do you understand? We're taught by Nichiren. How much have you learned from Shakyamuni? How much have you learned from Nichiren? Okay, whose disciple are you? Unquestionably. It's just like, duh! All right? The Sahe world Shakyamuni revealed in the Lifespan chapter is the eternal pure land, impervious to the three calamities and the cycle of the four kalpas. The Buddha neither has entered into extinction in the past nor will be born in the future. And the same is true of his disciples. So we're all eternal in this real Sahe, right? This means that their lives are perfectly endowed with the 3,000 worlds. That is, with the three realms of with the three realms of existence. So they all have the potential. They're all Buddhas. The Buddha did not reveal this truth in the theoretical teaching or the first 14 chapters of the Lotus Sutra, because the time was not right and the people's capacity was not yet developed. Okay? So that's why we have the theoretical teaching and then the essential teaching of the Lotus Sutra. Shakyamuni Buddha did not transmit the 5 characters of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the heart of the essential teaching of the Lotus Sutra, even to the Bodhisattvas Manjushri and Medicine King, let alone to any lesser disciples. Remember, they were all going like, hey, we're ready. We'll uphold the law. And he's going, sorry, dude, you don't qualify. You couldn't hang. That's when he summoned the bodhisattvas of the earth. He summoned from beneath the earth the great bodhisattvas as numerous as the dust particles of 1,000 worlds, and as he preached the 8 chapters, transferred it solely to them. The true object of devotion is described as following. The treasure tower sits in the air above the Sahe world that the Buddha of the essential teaching identified as the pure and eternal land. Okay, the Buddha of the essential teaching, the original teacher. All right? Myoho Renge-kyo appears in the center of the tower with the Buddhas Shakyamuni and Midi treasure seated to the right and left. So it ain't Shakyamuni. Do you understand? He's already qualifying. The object of devotion is establishing that differentiation between the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, thus come one, and Shakyamuni and Midi treasures, who are both also Buddhists, by the way. You understand? Right. Myoho Renge-kyo appears in the center of the tower with the Buddha Shakyamuni and Midi treasures seated to the right and left, and flanking them the 4 bodhisattvas, followers of Shakyamuni, led by superior practices Manjushri, Maitreya, and the other bodhisattvas who are followers of the 4 bodhisattvas are seated below. All the other major and minor bodhisattvas, whether they are disciples of the Buddha in his transient status or of the Buddhas of the 9 worlds, are like commoners. All of the other major and minor bodhisattvas, whether they are disciples of the Buddha in his transient status or of the Buddhas of the other 9 worlds, are like commoners before the thus come one Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Right? Kneeling on the ground in the presence of nobles and high-ranking court officials. The Buddhas who gathered from the other 9 worlds in the 10 directions all remain on the ground, showing that they are only temporary manifestations of the eternal Buddha and that their lands are transient, not eternal and unchanging. During the entire 50 years of Shakyamuni's teaching, only in the last 8 years did he preach the 28 chapters of the Lotus Sutra. Again, of all these chapters, only in the 8 chapters did he reveal and transfer the object of devotion to the bodhisattvas of the earth. But what did they do? Did they stick around to start propagating it? No, they split and waited for Mappo, right? During the 2 millennia of the former and middle day of the law, statues were made showing Mahakashayapa and Ananda flanking Shakyamuni Buddha of Hinayana, and Manjushri and Universal Worthy flanking Shakyamuni Buddha of Provisional Mahayana, and the Nirvana Sutra and the theoretical teaching of the Lotus Sutra. Even though statues and paintings were made of these Shakyamuni Buddhas during the 2 millennia, no image or statue was made of the Buddha of the lifespan chapter. And I've got this circled, and so I'll go to number 63, because that's something, again, I want to make sure I don't do off the top of my head. Here, the Buddha of the lifespan chapter indicates Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, or the law implicit in the depths of the lifespan chapter. Okay? But the law that is expressed in the orally transmitted teachings as the law implicit in the lifespan chapter it's the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, thus come one. Now, I understand why they don't get into that, because you got to go to OTT, and it's a very serious issue of faith, but I'm telling you, they're talking about the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, thus come one. All right? The Buddha of the lifespan chapter is the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, thus come one. Pardon me. Even these, only in the latter day of the law. Okay. Only in the latter day of the law will the representation of that Buddha appear. Okay. So he's talking about the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, thus come one, because it's the Gohonzon, right? Question. During the 2,000 years of the former and middle days of the law, the 4 ranks of bodhisattvas and the teachers constructed images of and built temples and pagodas for Buddhas of the other worlds, or for the Shakyamuni Buddha of Hinayana, of Provisional Mahayana, and the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings, or of the theoretical teachings of the Sutra, No one in India, China, or Japan, however, neither rulers nor subjects, revered the object of devotion of the lifespan chapter of the essential teaching, which is the Gohonzon, right? And the 4 great bodhisattvas. Superior practices and the 4 great bodhisattvas. Yeah. Though I think I generally understand what you're saying, I have never heard such a thing before, and therefore it startles my ears and perplexes my mind. Will you explain it to me again in greater detail? Okay? Answer. So that was a question. Answer. All the teachings that Shakyamuni Buddha expounded during his lifetime, all the 8 volumes and 28 chapters of the Lotus Sutra, the first 4 flavors of teachings that preceded the Sutra, okay, and the Nirvana Sutra that came after the Lotus, make an unbroken series of teachings like one perfect sutra. These teachings can be divided into 3 parts: preparation, revelation, and transmission. Okay, now he's going to requalify things on the basis of how he views them, because he's going to go all the way up to Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Preparation indicates that now he's going to talk about the entire breadth of Shakyamuni's teachings, from flower garland all the way to nirvana. Okay, so first, that's what he's talking about right now. Preparation indicates the part from the Flower Garland Sutra, his first preaching at the place of enlightenment, to the Wisdom Sutras. Okay, the end of the Provisional Mahayana. Okay, so from the beginning of his teaching to the end to the Wisdom Sutras, because Flower Garland is in Hinayana. It's Flower Garland, then Hinayana, the Agamas, and then back up. Okay, so, but at any rate, all the way up to basically the threefold Lotus Sutra, right? He says then, revelation indicates the 10 volumes of the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, and the Universal Worthy Sutra, and transmission indicates the Nirvana Sutra, right? The 10 volumes of the Revelation section, likewise, can be divided into these 3 parts. Okay, so the 10 volumes of the Revelation section indicate the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, the Universal, so the threefold Lotus Sutra and the Nirvana Sutra, right? Right? That's what that just said, correct? All right, so it says, the 10 volumes of the Revolution, so that can now be divided, likewise be divided in 3 parts. The Immeasurable Meaning Sutra and the introduction chapter of the Lotus Sutra are preparation, okay? Because the second expedient means is when he starts talking, right? The 15.5 chapters from expedient means chapter to the 19-line verse of distinction and benefits chapter are revelation. Okay? The remaining 11.5 chapters and 1 volume from the section in distinctions and benefits chapter clarifying the 4 stages of faith for people in the Buddha's lifetime to the Universal Worthy Sutra are transmission. Okay, so he just broke that all down. You ready? He's going to go on. The 10 volumes of the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, and the Universal Worthy Sutra can also be divided into 2 parts. Okay? Did you understand what he just said? The threefold Lotus Sutra can also be divided into 2 parts. Theoretical and essential. Each part has 3 divisions. In the theoretical teaching, preparation comprises the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra from the beginning of the threefold Lotus Sutra and the introduction chapter, the first chapter of the Lotus Sutra. Revelation. That's introduction. Revelation comprises 8 chapters from the expedient means through the prophecies chapters, and transmission comprises 5 chapters from the teacher of the law to the peaceful practices. The Buddha of the theoretical teaching declared that he first attained Buddhahood in this life. He revealed the 100 worlds and 1,000 factors inherent in life, but he did not expound their eternal nature. Since the theoretical teaching of the Lotus Sutra thus directly reveals a part of the Buddha's own enlightenment, it excels all other sutras that the Buddha had preached, now preached, or would preach, and is the correct teaching that is difficult to believe and difficult to understand. Is everybody with me? Still? Yeah? Yeah, okay. The relationship between Shakyamuni Buddha and his disciples can be traced back to the time when, as the 16th son of the great Buddha, Universal Wisdom Excellence, he planted the seeds of Buddhahood in their lives. His disciples, Shakyamuni, planted those seeds in the lives of his disciples. In Shakyamuni's present lifetime, a few of these disciples discovered the seeds when they heard the Flower Garland Sutra and the other teachings of the first 4 flavors. This was not, however, the Buddha's true intention. What was his true intention? To ultimately take them to the Lotus Sutra. Okay? Their discovery through these teachings was like poison having a positive effect, because those are not correct teachings, but because these were disciples of the Buddha, they were able to glean from them the correct nature of those teachings. Ordinary people in the persons of the 2 vehicles came to the Lotus Sutra gradually through the first 4 flavors of teachings. They then revealed the seeds of Buddhahood from within themselves and were able to obtain the fruit of enlightenment. Among the human and heavenly beings who listened to the 8 chapters for the first time in Shakyamuni's days, some took the seeds into their lives by hearing just a single phrase or verse. Some nurtured and harvested the seeds they had received. Others brought their seeds to fruition when they came to the Universal Worthy and Nirvana Sutras. Still others appeared in the former or middle day of the law, and through the Hinayana and provisional Mahayana teachings obtained the fruit of enlightenment of the Lotus Sutra. These last are like the disciples in Shakyamuni's lifetime who discovered their seeds of Buddhahood through the first 4 flavors of teachings. Preparation, revelation, and transmission also exist in the 14 chapters of the essential teaching of the Lotus Sutra. Pardon me. The first half of the Emerging from the Earth chapter is preparation. The latter half of this chapter, the Lifespan chapter, and the first half of the following, Distinctions and Benefit chapter, 1 chapter and 2 halves, are revelation. The remainder is transmission. Does everybody remember what I just said? What did I just say? The first half of the emerging from the earth chapter is preparation. The latter half of this chapter of the lifespan chapter, and the first half of the following distinctions and benefits. So the last half of the 15th, the whole 16th, and the first half of the 17th. The one chapter in two halves. He refers to that in his teaching constantly. Our revelation, and the remainder is transmission. The Buddha of the essential teaching denies that he first attained Buddhahood in this life. The difference between the theoretical and the essential teachings is as great as that between heaven and earth. The latter reveals the eternity of the 10 worlds and further the realm of the environment. The theoretical teaching, the first 4 flavors of teachings, the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra and the Nirvana Sutra, were all preached according to the capacities of the people. All these teachings that fall into the 3 categories of preaching are therefore easy to believe and easy to understand. In contrast, the essential teaching, which transcends the 3 categories, is difficult to believe and difficult to understand, for it directly reveals the Buddha's own enlightenment. Nevertheless, even the difference between the doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life of the theoretical teaching and that of the essential teaching pales into significance before the ultimate teaching contained in the depths of the lifespan chapter. In contrast, the essential teaching, which transcends the 3 categories, is difficult to believe and difficult to understand, for it directly reveals the Buddha's own enlightenment. Okay, now he's talking about the essential teaching of the Lotus Sutra. But then he goes on to say that nevertheless, even the difference between the doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, of the theoretical teaching and that of the essential teaching, pales into insignificance before the ultimate teaching contained in the depths. So what's he saying?
Expedient means.
No, what he's basically saying is that even though the teaching of the theoretical teaching compares in comparison to the essential teaching. The first 14 chapters pale in comparison to what's revealed in the second 14 chapters. But what he's now talking about is what's hidden in the depths. It's not you can't read the Lotus Sutra and even see these words. What is he talking about? He's saying that both of the things that are revealed on the surface of the Lotus Sutra, the theoretical and the essential teaching, he's saying the theoretical teaching is like this compared to the essential teaching of the Lotus Sutra. But he's saying both of them are like this when compared to the ultimate teaching contained in the depths of the lifespan chapter. What would that be? Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. So both of the teachings of the theoretical and essential teaching, the Lotus Sutra, pale in comparison to Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, period. And the Buddhism sowing. He's going to say all that. The essential teaching contained in the depths of the lifespan chapter also has its preparation, revelation, and transmission. Shakyamuni Buddha preached the Lotus Sutra in the past as the 16th son of the great universal wisdom excellence. When he appeared in his present life in India, he also preached teachings for some 50 years, from the Flower Garland Sutra to the 14 chapters of the theoretical teaching of the Lotus Sutra and the Nirvana Sutra, because he puts the theoretical the first 14 chapters of the Lotus Sutra and the Nirvana Sutra on the same level. Okay? All these, because the Nirvana is not of the Buddha's mind, right? All these sutras, as well as the countless sutras of the Buddha of the 10 directions and 3 existences, are preparation for revealing the heart of the lifespan chapter. So what did he just say there, man? That's some heavy shit. Are you guys catching this? Okay, he just now compared the theoretical teaching and the essential teaching of the 28th chapter Lotus Sutra. Now he's saying, and now he's putting both of them at the same level and saying that doesn't even begin to compare with the teaching that's hidden in the depths of the Lotus Sutra. Right. Now he's going on to say that, pardon me, when all these sutras in the Kali are preparation for what he's revealing. Okay, so what he's saying is that all of the sutras Shakyamuni ever taught, okay, as the 16th son of the great universal wisdom excellence. And then he goes on to say also, all the Buddhas, all these sutras that Shakyamuni preached as well as, which are countless, okay, because he's been doing this since the time of, raising these disciples since that time. And all these sutras are as well as the countless sutras of the Buddhas of the 10 directions and the 3 existences.
Preparation.
Are all of these are expedient means because they're not Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. They're all preparation for what all Buddhas eventually get to, which is the truth. Okay? So, all the teachings other than the 1 chapter and 2 halves are Hinayana, in nature and erroneous. Wow. He's saying that straight up. All the teachings other than the 1 chapter and 2 halves are Hinayana, lesser vehicles, in nature and erroneous. Not only do they fail to lead into enlightenment, but they also lack the truth. Those who believe in them are meager in virtue, heavy with defilement, ignorant, poor, solitary, and like birds and beasts that do not know their own parents. The first half of the Lotus Sutra, I read it like this because that's the way he wrote it. The first half of the Lotus Sutra, the first half of the Lotus Sutra and the sutras preceding it contain the perfect teaching. But even this is not the cause for Buddhahood. Because that perfect teaching is still not Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, because only the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, thus come one, can reveal Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. So none of those teachings could have access to reveal it, because the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, thus come one, has not made his advent until the latter day. Get it? So he says, the first half of the Lotus Sutra and the sutras preceding it contain the perfect teaching, but even this is not the cause for Buddhahood. Much less so are teachings of a Hinayana nature, such as the Mahavrochana Sutra. It is out of the question to think that the scholars and teachers of the 7 schools, including the Flower Garland and True Word, preach the cause for attaining Buddhahood. These inferior sutras seem to fall within the Tripitaka connecting and specific teachings, but actually they are no better than the lowest 2. Those are the first 3 flavors, right? They may maintain that their doctrines are incomparably profound, but nowhere did they clarify when the Buddha planted the seeds of Buddhahood or when he nurtured and reaped them. Though these doctrines are no different from Hinayana, which demands that one reduce one's body to ashes and annihilate one's consciousness, for they do not reveal when the Buddha started teaching and when he finished. So he's blowing off all the rest of Mahayana outside of the lotus. If a consort of a king were to conceive by a beast, her baby would be inferior to a Chandala. Setting aside these lesser teachings, the 8 chapters of the Revelation section, the 2nd through the 9th chapters of the theoretical teaching, seem to have been expounded for the sake of the persons of the 2 vehicles rather than for the ordinary people in Bodhisattvas in Shakyamuni's lifetime. From a more profound viewpoint, they are intended for the ordinary people after the Buddha's passing in the former, middle, and latter days of the law, and in particular for the ordinary people in the beginning of the latter day, which is when he's actually writing this. Question: on what authority do you say so? Answer: the teacher of the law chapter of Lotus Sutra states, since hatred and jealousy toward this sutra abound even when the thus come one is in the world, how much more will this be so after his passing? The Treasure Tower chapter states, they, the Buddhas, make certain that the law will long endure. The thus come one, many treasures, I, myself, and these emanation Buddhas who have gathered here surely know this is our aim. Look at what the encouraging devotion and peaceful practices chapter state about the future. The theoretical teaching was preached for the people after Shakyamuni Buddha's passing. As regards the essential teaching, it was addressed exclusively to the people early in the latter day of the law. As regards the essential teaching, it was addressed exclusively to the people early in the latter day of the law, because in it is hidden in the depths the true essential teaching of Nam-myoho, the great pure law. On the surface, the Buddha seems to have preached this teaching for the enlightenment of the people of his day. He planted the seeds of Buddhahood in their lives in the remote past, numberless major world system dust particle kalpas ago, and nurtured the seeds through his preaching as the 16th son of the Buddha, great universal wisdom excellence, major world system dust particle kalpas ago, and through the first 4 flavors of teachings and the theoretical teaching in this life. Then with the essential teaching, he brought his followers to the stage of near perfect enlightenment, and finally to that of perfect enlightenment. In actuality, however, the essential teaching bears no resemblance whatsoever to the theoretical teaching. The preparation, revelation, and transmission of the essential teaching are intended entirely for the beginning of the latter day of the law. The essential teaching of Shakyamuni's lifetime and that revealed at the beginning of the latter day are both pure and perfect, in that both lead directly to Buddhahood. Shakyamuni's, however, is the Buddhism of the harvest, and this is Buddhism of sowing. The core of his teaching is 1 chapter in 2 halves, and the core of mine. This isn't Shakyamuni's teaching. Oh. The core of mine is the 5 characters of the Daimoku alone. I'll stop there. That's a good place to stop. Question: on what authority do you say that the essential teaching is meant for the generations of the latter day of the law? We'll continue there on page 370 next week.
Okay.
Next week?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're gonna skip
1
next
week
week.
off.
Yeah, we're gonna take 1 week off. We live over here where we enjoy
Okay.
life. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.